Walker.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I'm pleased to take a call in this committee stage on the Student Loan Scheme Amendment Bill and proud to move an amendment to this bill via my first supplementary order paper in this House. Mr Chair, I spoke yesterday in the second reading debate about the Green Party's concerns with this bill and particularly with reducing the duration of the repayment holiday for overseas borrowers from 3 years to 1. And so I'm very pleased to move an amendment today to retain the maximum duration of the repayment holiday at 3 years. And I'm also pleased to see that great minds think alike and that Labor has also moved substantively similar amendments. And I hope that they will be supporting mine. And I challenge the Labor Party also, actually, if these amendments that we've both proposed are defeated in this House tonight, to vote against the bill when it comes up for third reading. So, Mr Chair, I'd like to revisit why we have a 3-year repayment holiday in the first place. A repayment holiday is an automatic suspension from the repayment obligations of your student loan while living overseas. You still accrue interest. A borrower still accrues interest, but is not required to make repayments and therefore can't fall into arrears. And this is important because, as was noted in the Select Committee's report, a typical borrower overseas may face interest and arrears obligations after a repayment holiday that amount to 2 to 3 times the original value of their loan. And that could militate against the likelihood of them ever returning to New Zealand or repaying their loan. So, Mr Chair, it's very important that we get policy settings right that incentivise people to A, pay off their loans and B, return to New Zealand. And it's been quoted extensively in debate on this bill, but I think it's worth repeating once again that the reasons that Minister Dunn had for introducing the 3-year repayment holiday in 2007 are no less relevant in 2012. And those reasons are to help remove a potential disincentive to skilled New Zealanders from returning home. We've heard the quote, "The reality they all face was a very massive debt upon their return to New Zealand, which in some cases would be enough for them to make their decision not to come home at all, and our country would be the loser." And Mr Chair, that is still the case. And I want to address the Minister's contribution earlier. He said 5 years is a long time, things have changed since then, it's a recognition of reality. Well, Mr Chair, I sat in on the Select Committee while it was hearing evidence on this bill. And we heard from officials that very little research has been done on the impact of having a 3-year repayment holiday. It's only been 5 years since it was introduced. So there's only one full 3-year period for people actually within that 5 years taking a repayment holiday. So there's been very little research to address what impact it actually has on borrowers' behaviour, and I'm quoting again from the Select Committee report, "There is not enough empirical evidence to evaluate the effect of the 3-year repayment holiday introduced in 2007. Limited modelling has been done and the likely effect of curtailing the holiday and borrowers' response to the change is uncertain." It just seems like bad lawmaking to me, Mr Chair, to be making this change in a vacuum of knowledge, and it seems to be based solely on ideology and, if I may borrow the phrase that's been used earlier, completely the opposite of a pragmatic approach, Mr Chair. The government, we know, is looking for ways to rein in student loans without touching interest-free student loans, and this just seems to me as being their attempt to do that. So, Mr Chair, my amendment aims to prevent this bad lawmaking by retaining the maximum duration of the repayment holiday at 3 years. I invite members to support it, and as I mentioned before, I challenge the Labor Party that if these amendments do not pose, if they really believe that the repayment holiday should be kept at 3 years, and they shouldn't be supporting this bill through the rest of the stages of this House. Mr Chair, the reasons given in 2007 from the Minister are no less relevant now. And the fact is that we could be creating policy settings which will make it less likely for people to return to New Zealand and pay off their loans. And I'd like to note that one thing that has changed since 2007 is that even more New Zealanders are moving permanently overseas, Mr Chair, and we know that the figures for this in this year are the highest that they have ever been. So in that context, it seems very important that we make careful law that's based on evidence, that doesn't fly in the face of advice that's been received and that has actual empirical backing behind it, and we just haven't had the chance since 2007 when this was introduced for that to be the case. It's irresponsible to be reducing it down to 1 year. So, Mr Chair, I invite the House to support my amendments. Thank you.
Paul Goldsmith.
Thank you, Mr Chairman.